Hi, WCCC here again, and we're going to be covering part 3 of our bootcamp bit here. So today we're going to be talking about kind of a specific detailing of another sort of rock, paper, scissors in this game, and that is the roles people tend to use and the roles that are the most well-founded. We're talking primarily about tanks and mechs, specifically tanks, probably low-spec only tanks, maybe mid-spec tanks, I don't know. Those are kind of wonky. And probably ground mechs versus air mechs. So without further ado, we're going to go and get into the advantages of tanks in low spec. So we're going to kick open test mode with our tank here, and this is, I assure you, actually a quite deadly tank by many regards. It's an old piece of mine, but you know it's held true because, quite frankly, it's a good tank. Tanks tend to be immortal. So we're going to kick our energy down to about 100% here. And we're going to do some test shots. Yep. Yeah, there's no problem. We can just drop lead all day, and we have a large ammo supply. We also have pretty good movement speed, so we're actually going to load a non-sea world, I'm thinking. Oh. Let's just go ahead and do island. Island's the best anyways. And, yeah, for the most part, you can see it's pretty smooth sailing. It aims well, it shoots, etc. It even has an overdrive button that hardly even taxes the battery. This is the light version that's made to be under 5,000 kilograms. So, with that in mind, this is a pretty simple machine as far as things go. However, it is quite potent in many regards, which we can demonstrate here briefly. Yeah, so that was about the time we took using a weird double-stage trigger to mow down that thing as it would have taken on automatic fire with a mid-spec bot. So the advantages of tanks in low spec is that they have a thin profile, so they have relatively small hit area, but they have a very high amount of volume relative to their exposed surface area. On top of that, they also have turrets that are incredibly simple and reliable in nature, and they have a lot of spare space on their chassis you can mount extra things into. So in this case, that really covers the most. So let's go and demonstrate what we mean by spare gadgets. We have actually laser-guided artillery on this piece. I've covered this before in other videos, I think. We have missile launchers, which are one of my buttons here since I found out which one. Oh yeah, it's button number 1. Yeah, that's a nice volley of missiles. We have a rearward emergency gun that fires a combination of tank gun, machine gun, and mortar. It's kind of a spam cannon to say get off my tail. The turret obviously rotates 360 with an upwards aiming gun, and it has small reactive armor plates all over its exterior. I didn't remember what the armor buttons were. I absolutely cannot remember for the life of me. Let's go and check the usage tab. Oh, I used LKUP, not numpad. So yeah, let me tell. We have these rear plates, these left turret plate, right turret plate, forward plate, left plate, right plate. You know, it uses pistons to space out the armor, so it adds a little extra barrier to make sure that the barrier is more effective. These are just kind of excess features you can cram on this thing with no issue. We even have an integrated minigun inside the main barrel of the tank. So, put simply, tanks really have an advantage as far as economy and stat potency. And if you build them right, they can be moderately fast, even in, well, fast enough anyways, even in low energy environments. Now, moving on, we're going to cover the concept of mechs. And mechs are kind of interesting, suffice to say. I would generally define mechs in 2 categories. Ground mechs that spend most of their time on the ground but can do jetpacks. And air mechs that can spend most of their time in the air but can also use the ground. The distinction is pretty big, and recently there was a nerf for aircraft being hit harder and things moving faster being hit slightly harder. Maybe even moderately depending on the server settings. So, based on that whole shindig, we have actually a pretty good balance of how things are. It used to be back in the day that air mechs were just plain overpowered, or borderline anyways. Rexes used to just punch a hole in everything to the point where I made my own Rex to kind of get on level. This is an old piece of mine named the OVK, or Overkill 330C. That is because 22 upgrades have been made to this thing in its lifetime. It was really something in its heyday, and it's still not bad. It features a good example of Western weapon rack technology, which is significantly different and older than the end-frame weapon rack technology. Although I will admit, end-frame is probably superior in the long run, even if they are a bit more weight-intensive and a little more... I don't know, there's something about them I don't like. Just kind of putting lots of weapons on a single frame instead of trying to have a durable single weapon on a frame. So, covering the idea of ground tanks in mid-spec, as you can tell, we were actually losing energy here. Just shooting our weapons. Hell, I think just leaving our shield on is taking our energy to 100. So we kicked the energy to about 350. That's about mid-spec as far as things go. So in mid-spec, our energy is regenerating. We can shoot, and the shooting will tax our energy a bit here. This isn't particularly energy heavy. This is put probably somewhere between low spec and mid spec. Explains a lot about its nature. But all in all, the OVK is pretty simple. Now the advantages of ground mechs is, and I can demonstrate this very briefly here by loading up the D&K 120L, is that the verticality as well as the modularity and the highly offensive nature of most mechs makes them actually expert tank hunters by nature. We're going to do a quick demonstration here. We're going to engage our jetpack. We're going to fly on over. We're going to land on top of this tank, and we're going to use... whoops, I can't see that low down due to my big old hefty chest plate. But we're going to land on top of the enemy, and we're going to shove our fist in the sucker, pull the trigger, or something like that. I don't know, I'm a little rusty with the OVK. I haven't used it in a while, but there we go. That's more or less what I want. But the concept is, by using verticality, you can ultimately defeat a tank quite well. They have a hard time keeping pace with you. You can straight up just land on them and then just point blank the crap out of them, doing grievous amounts of damage. But this tank is obviously highly armored because I don't play around with my tanks. But yeah, I think at days end, these two pieces would be a very good match for each other. I can shoot this thing for years, but a better example, I'll just cite because I'm failing to demonstrate this in the moment. It was a couple days ago, someone brought out a Big Bertha in the server. Not naming names, but I thought it was a good idea. And you know, it was a pretty good support weapon and had pretty high-powered mortars. It wasn't totally inconceivable. However, with the moment the enemy closed in on them, they were in pretty deep stuff there, let's just say. Put simply, I think I used my Dreadnought, the BDK 150 probably at the time, if I had to guess. And I just dove in, landed on top of the guy, flipped on some chain swords, and sat there and just mowed his turret off, at which point he was rendered completely helpless, because that is where the majority, if not all of his firepower is. And once that happens, it's any man's game. So that is the disadvantage of tanks, is that their main turret tends to be almost all of their firepower. And you need to design very well to work around that. But given their economy and their compact size, a well-built tank can actually do a pretty good job of things. And I think otherwise the advantages of mechs is that while they do have a tall and thin profile that doesn't allow for a lot of energy storage, which generally defines most mechs to be mid or high spec, they really are more modular for what kind of weapons you can put on them. They're very friendly to use, they're very fun to pilot. I mean, they're a blast, don't get me wrong. And all in all, there's a lot of really good science that goes into them. And they make great showpieces. Anyone can show up in a tank. And that tank might look cool, but in my opinion, the OVK 330C looks just a significant amount cooler. So, let's move on to our next segment. This is the tendencies we want to get to before we get to the advantages of Air Mechs. The tendencies of Air Mechs is that Air Mechs as a whole tend to, and I say it's kind of subjectively, tend to have pretty poor energy storage and regeneration ratios. Right here we have a good old Rex US Wrangler, made in the USA, baby, but based upon knowledge dug up from Rex flight systems and dimensions to try and keep it within the same realm as a Rex for size, stature, movement. That being said, the Wrangler is the berserker of Rexes. Rexes were the meta quite a while ago. If you don't know, you probably don't, because the speed buff basically destroyed them. Yeah, the Rex we have right here is a little snagged on the floor. That's alright. He stays mostly on target. And it'll tell you it's 2 revolvers. They have modular mode, so I can set this to minigun. I can set this to MG mortar. You can do a lot of crazy crap with these weapons, but if you look at my HP, about 4331 and my energy of 87, there's a lot to be said there. So, as this is a high-speed mech, its flight systems alone are incredibly energy intensive, although incredibly potent as well. And yeah, I've recently did some upgrades on the flight system because I had a bunch of crap lingering around from. What I suspect is the fact that the Gravity Rex showed up on the workshop. At least last I checked, it was the first Rex to actually be uploaded to the workshop. The Gravity Rex appeared to be a form of Simulacron, particularly in regard to the flight systems, and definitely in terms of weaponry. So it was a copy of a copy of a copy, by definition, that failed to kind of resemble the original product wholly. I think that's what I would define as Simulacron. It's kind of a nerdy sci-fi term, truth be told. But, yeah, well, these can be quite deadly and quite maneuverable little beasties. In fact, these are pretty mean guys. You know how to pilot them, and they pilot well. They are not perfect. They are not impeccable, and in fact, they do tend to have pretty good trade-offs. So, yeah, given this is a more firepower-heavy version that's not going to use an arm shield and a rifle, the use of its heavy weaponry definitely can't tank the energy depending on what's being fired. Yeah, flamethrowers going to just destroy my energy. And that's kind of like the tendencies I want to get into. They tend to be not high HP content because they tend to be fast. Definitely not a lot of energy content or efficiency. And it tends to be that these days when they move very fast, they can take a hell of a lot of damage from being hit up close. So depending, I don't know, it's your call. I would say, truth be told. But I just want to cover that so we're very clear that Air Mechs, while definitely the shiniest of the bunch, are not really the most practical in Newtonian physics when it comes down to things. So, moving on. Let's see. Yeah, we're going to... Let's see. Yeah, and a kind of rock, paper, scissors I would define here because of what I stated. In fact, I can demonstrate this again very briefly, is the rock, paper, scissors I want to get to defining is that tanks are good against air mechs, chances are, because of their statistical superiority, and air mechs tend to not be high firepower. Or high energy cost if they are high firepower. Let's look at this thing. I can take my energy in seconds. Tanks tend to be hunted by ground mechs using jetpacks or even just outmatching them in terms of heavy chassis. Because ground mechs have the advantage of being able to be a heavier build. Hell, damn near every ground mech I make these days is based upon almost entirely, if not entirely, heavy chassis. I've been building those like, I want to say like 16 metric tons or some crap like that, and it still was almost entirely heavy construction, except for the hands. Just the hands. Don't ask why. It's very complex. All about leverage. But, man, I want to talk about, like, how long it's going to take the Rex to actually be able to do good damage against this here piece. And we're going to be here for a while shooting this guy. If you look at the HP content damage, it's not that impressive. We look at just popping this dude a good one in the face. Just look at that. I did probably more overall damage in a single shot than he did after 5 seconds of wailing on me. If I get a shot every 5 shots he gets in, he's probably fucked. So, yeah. It's just too easy sometimes. And while you can definitely be doing some nice maneuvers, the tank's low profile will make it hard to hit the tank from afar. In CQC, the tank's low profile isn't as much of an advantage, but at long range, I guarantee you it is. Especially if you get chased down and hit your boost button. Oh, that's my float button, my bad. Let's see, my boost button is probably what, Shift W then? Knowing this old config? It's actually O. That's very interesting. Wait, what? O. No. Oh, no, it's going to be the manual for the other piece. Yeah, I don't know what a boost button is. No, that's my aiming module. Yep, don't know where controls are. Well, that sucks. But, yeah, my point is at day's end that, there is actually a lot of really good stuff you can do with the tank at longer ranges against lighter targets. So in this sense, I think tanks make a really good anti-air role. And there's also boats and aircraft to consider, but those tend to be very specialized terrain and have their own consistent sets of trade-offs. Aircraft always taking more damage, boats always being on the same elevation, meaning that they don't maneuver quite as diversely. And yeah, so we've basically reviewed most material here for today. So I'm sorry I'm keeping you guys for so long. Let's see. And I would say that air mechs probably have an advantage over ground mechs in conclusion, but the advantage these days is rather slight, and I wouldn't consider it worth it in most cases. I know it's pretty soul crushing, or even maybe pejorative for many people to hear these days with the love and the diversity and even the quality you can find of air mechs. But I think on the whole, if we're talking about average production and the amount of engineering required to get the bang for your buck, I would say ground mechs are probably currently the meta. They don't even need to be true walkers, they just need to be ground mechs with a jetpack. And the air mechs are pretty good, tanks are pretty good. There's no obvious, you should always build this, I want to be clear on. But I think we talk about what the average production value is. But if you're in a low energy setting and you can't afford to make an air mech or even a ground mech, I would consider looking into tanks and trying to build a well-balanced tank that does maybe 200 to 275 in ground speed without boost. Maybe throw in a booster for S&G's factor. And otherwise just kind of keep things controlled. So until next time, WCCC signing out.